this country, or should they be deported eventually?
Well, the judgment has to be made whether or not, in this young man's case, he has a mom at home. There's an overwhelming reason why he'd be put in a plane and flown back to his mom.
Follow, sir. You mentioned circumstances that must be horrific. The Customs and Border Protection facility in Donna, Texas, I was there, is at 1,556% capacity right now with mostly unaccompanied minors. There are kids that are sleeping on floors. They are packed into these pods. I've spoken to lawyers who say that some of these children have not seen the sun in days. What's your reaction? What is your reaction to these images that have come out from that particular facility? Is what's happening inside acceptable to you? And when is this going to be fixed?
That's a serious question, right? Is it acceptable to me? Come on. That's why we're going to be moving 1,000 of those kids out quickly. That's why I got Fort Bliss opened up. That's why I've been working from the moment this started to happen to try to find additional access for children to be able to safely, not just children, but particularly children, to be able to safely be housed while we follow through on the rest of what's happening. That is totally unacceptable. Ken.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you about Afghanistan. You face a May 1st deadline for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from that country. As a candidate in foreign affairs, you wrote that it is past time to end these forever wars. Can you commit to the American people that by May 2nd, the U.S. will no longer have forces in Afghanistan?
The answer is that it's going to be hard to meet the May 1 deadline. Just in terms of tactical reasons, it's hard to get those troops out. So what we've been doing, what I've been doing, and what Secretary Blinken has been doing, we've been meeting with our allies, those other nations that have NATO allies who have troops in Afghanistan as well. And if we leave, we're going to do so in a safe and orderly way. We're in consultation, I say, with our allies and partners and how to proceed. And Secretary Blinken is meeting in Brussels this week with our NATO allies, particularly those who have forces there. And General Austin is just met with Kayani, and I'm waiting for the briefing on that. He is the leader, quote, in Afghanistan and Kabul. And there's a UN-led process that's beginning shortly on how to mechanically get people, how to end this war. But it is not my intention to stay there for a long time. But the question is, how and in what circumstances do we meet that agreement that was made by President Trump to leave under a deal that looks like it's not being able to be worked out to begin with? How's that done? But we are not staying a long time.
You just said if we leave. Do you think it's possible that
we will leave? The question is when we leave.
Do you believe, though, it's possible we could have troops there next year?
I can't picture that being the case. Okay, Kristen.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Given the conditions that were just laid out at the migrant facilities at the U.S. border, will you commit to allowing journalists to have access to the facilities that are overcrowded moving forward?
I will commit when my plan very shortly is underway to let you have access to not just them, but to other facilities as well.
How soon will journalists be able to have access to the facilities? We've obviously been allowed to be inside one, but we haven't seen the facilities in which children are packed together to really give the American people a chance to see that. Will you commit to transparency on this issue?
I will commit to transparency, and as soon as I am in a position to be able to implement what we're doing right now. And one of the reasons I haven't gone down, all my chief folks have gone down, is I don't want to become the issue. I don't want to be, bringing all the Secret Service and everybody with me to get in the way. So this is being set up, and you'll have full access to everything once we get this thing moving.
Okay, and just to be clear, how soon will that be, Mr. President?
I don't know, to be clear.
Okay, and do you bear responsibility for everything that's happening at the border now? I hear you talking a lot about the past administration. You decided to roll back some of those policies. Did you move too quickly
To roll back what, I'm sorry?
Policies. Did you move too quickly to roll back some of the executive orders of your predecessor?
First of all the policies that are underway were not helping at all. Did not slow up the amount of immigration and as many people coming. And rolling back the policies of separating children from their mothers, I make no apology for that. Rolling back the policies of remain in Mexico, sitting on the edge of the Rio Grande in a muddy circumstance with not enough to eat, I make no apologies for that. I make no apologies for ending programs that did not exist before Trump became president, that have an incredibly negative impact on the law, international law, as well as on human dignity. And so I make no apologies for that.
To ask you about foreign policy, Mr. President. Overnight, we learned that North Korea tested 2 ballistic missiles. What, if any, actions will you take, and what is your red line on North Korea?
Let me say that, number one, UN Resolution 1718 was violated by those particular missiles that were tested, number one. We're consulting with our allies and partners, and there will be responses if they choose to escalate. We will respond accordingly. But I'm also prepared for some form of diplomacy, but it has to be conditioned upon the end result of denuclearization. So that's what we're doing right now, consulting with our allies.
Just very quick follow-up.
You only got another hour now, okay?
Diplomacy, can you define what you mean? And former President Obama warned the incoming President Trump that North Korea was the top foreign policy issue that he was watching. Is that how you assess the crisis in North Korea?
Yes. Okay, hang on a second here. Kristen, Nancy, CBS.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to go back to voting rights. And as Yamiche mentioned, Republican legislatures across the country are working to pass bills that would restrict voting, particularly Democrats fear impacting minority voters and young voters, the very people who helped to get you elected in November. Are you worried that if you don't manage to pass voting rights legislation, that your party is going to lose seats and possibly lose control of the House and the Senate in 2022?
What I'm worried about is how un-American this whole initiative is. It's sick. It's sick. Deciding in some states that you cannot bring water to people standing in line, waiting to vote. Deciding that you're going to end voting at 5 o'clock when working people are just getting off work. Deciding that there will be no absentee ballots under the most rigid circumstances. It's all designed, and I'm going to spend my time doing 3 things. 1, trying to figure out how to pass the legislation passed by the House, number 1. Number 2, educating the American public. The Republican voters I know find this despicable. Republican voters, the folks outside this White House. I'm not talking about the elected officials. I'm talking about voters. And so I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. I mean, this is gigantic, what they're trying to do. And it cannot be sustained. And do everything in my power, along with my friends in the House and the Senate to keep that from becoming the law.
Is there anything else you can do about it besides passing legislation?
The answer is yes, but I'm not going to lay out a strategy in front of the whole world and you now.
And then on a related note, have you decided whether you are going to run for re-election in 2024? You haven't set up a re-election campaign yet, as your predecessor had by this time.
My predecessor needed to. My predecessor. Oh, God, I miss him.
Have you?
No, the answer is yes. My plan is to run for re-election. That's my expectation.
And then on one other note, on bipartisanship, your old friend, Mitch McConnell, says you have only spoken to each other once since you took office, and that you have moved far left since taking office. Do you see it the same way he does? Have you rejected bipartisanship?
No, I haven't at all. I've been meeting. When's the last time a president invited the opposite party down at least a half a dozen times to talk about issues, everything from how we work. We're working with a group of 20 members of the Senate right now and House on how we reestablish our ability to make computer chips and how we get ahead of the game, how we can work together. We're working together on a bunch of things. But look, I know Mitch well. Mitch knows me well. I would expect Mitch to say exactly what he said. But this is a matter of making sure that I would like elected Republican support. But what I know I have now is I have electoral support from Republican voters. Republican voters agree with what I'm doing. And so unless Mitch says the last thing I did, this last piece of legislation, is so far left, well, then he ought to take a look at his party. Over 50% of them must be over that edge as well, because they support what I did. Okay, where am I here? Let me see. Caitlin?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have a question for you, but first, I'd like to follow up on a question from Yamiche, and that's on the filibuster.
That counts as a question, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll make it quick. It's a
No,
quick
no, you
question. Regarding the filibuster, at John Lewis's funeral, President Barack Obama said he believed the filibuster was a relic of the Jim Crow era. Do you agree?
Yes.
If not, why not abolish it if it's a relic of the Jim Crow era?
Successful electoral politics is the art of the possible.
Of the Jim Crow era.
No, you
Question. Regarding the filibuster, at John Lewis's funeral, President Barack Obama said he believed the filibuster was a relic of the Jim Crow era. Do you agree?
Yes.
If not, why not abolish it if it's a relic of the Jim Crow era?
Successful electoral politics is the art of the possible. Successful electoral politics is the art of the possible. Let's figure out how we can get this done and move in the direction of significantly changing the abuse of even the filibuster rule first. It's been abused from the time it came into being by an extreme way in the last 20 years. Let's deal with the abuse first.
It sounds like you're moving closer to eliminating the filibuster. Is that correct?
I answered your question.
You also just made some news by saying that you are going to run for re-election.
I said that is my expectation.
So is that a yes, that you are running for re-election?
Look, I don't know where you guys come from, man. I've never been able to travel. I'm a great respecter of fate. I've never been able to plan 3.5 years ahead for certain.
And if you do run, will Vice President Harris be on your ticket?
I would fully expect that to be the case. She's doing a great job. She's a great partner. She's a great partner.
And do you believe you'll be running against former President Trump?
Oh, come on. I don't even think about it. I have no idea. I have no idea whether there'll be a Republican Party. Do you? I know you don't have to answer my question, but I mean, do you? I mean, look, this is the way I view things. I become a great respecter of fate in my life. I set a goal of this that's in front of me to get things done for for the people I care most about, which are hard-working, decent American people who are getting really having it stuck to them. I want to change the paradigm. I want to change the paradigm. We start to reward work, not just wealth. I want to change the paradigm. If you notice, didn't you find it kind of interesting that my Republican friends were worried about that the cost and the taxes that had to be had, if there is any tax to be had as they talk about it, in dealing with the act that we just passed, which puts money in people's pockets, ordinary people? Do you hear them complain when they passed close to $2 trillion Trump tax cut, 83% going to the top 1%? Do you hear them talk about that at all? I love the fact that they found this whole idea of concern about the federal budget. It's kind of amazing. When the federal budget is saving people's lives, they don't think it's such a good idea. When the federal budget is feathering the nest of the wealthiest Americans, 90 of the Fortune 500 companies making billions of dollars not paying a cent in taxes, reducing taxes to the point that people who are making, if you're a husband and wife, school, think it's such a good idea. When the federal budget is feathering the nest of the wealthiest Americans, 90 of the Fortune 500 companies making billions of dollars not paying a cent in taxes, reducing taxes to the point that people who are making, if you're a husband and wife, a school teacher, and a cop, you're paying at a higher rate than the average person making $1 billion a year is. Something's wrong. Their newfound concern. I'm concerned, look, I meant what I said when I ran, and a lot of you still. Something's wrong. Making billions of dollars, not paying a cent in taxes. When the federal budget is feathering the nest of the wealthiest Americans, 90 of the Fortune 500 companies making billions of dollars not paying a cent in taxes, reducing taxes to the point that people who are budget is saving people's $2 trillion Trump tax cut, 83% going to the top 1%. Do you hear them talk about that at all? I love the fact that they found this whole idea of concern about the federal budget. It's kind of amazing. When the federal budget is saving people's lives, they don't think it's such a good idea. When the federal budget is feathering the nest of the wealthiest Americans, 90 of the Fortune 500 companies making billions of dollars not paying a cent in taxes, reducing taxes to the point that people who are making, if you're a husband and wife, a school teacher, and a cop, you're paying at a higher rate than the average person making $1 billion a year is. Something's wrong. Their newfound concern. I'm concerned, look, I meant what I said when I ran, and a lot of you still think I'm wrong, and I respect that. So I'm running for 3 reasons. To restore the soul. I'm concerned, look, I meant what I said when I ran, and a lot of you still think I'm wrong, and I respect that. So I'm running for dollars, not paying a cent in taxes, reducing taxes to the point that people who are making, if you're a husband and wife, a school teacher, and a cop, you're paying at a higher rate than the average person making $1 billion a year is. Something's wrong. Their newfound concern. I'm concerned, look, I meant what I said when I ran, and a lot of you still think I'm wrong, and I respect that. So I'm running for 3 reasons. To restore the soul, dignity, honor, honesty, transparency to the American political system. 2, to rebuild the backbone of this country, the middle class, hardworking people and people struggling to get in the middle class. They built America, and unions built them. The 3rd reason I said I was running was to unite the country. And generically speaking, all of you said, no, you can't do that. Well, I've not been able to unite the Congress, but I've been uniting the country based on the polling data. We have to come together. We have to. So from my perspective, it's to me, it's about just getting out there, putting one foot in front of the other, and just trying to make things better for people. Just hard-working people. People get up every morning and just want to figure out how to put food on the table for their kids, be able to have a little bit of breathing room, being able to make sure that they go to bed not staring to the ceiling like my dad did, wondering whether, since he didn't have health insurance, what happens if mom gets sick or he got sick. These are basic things. Basic things. And I'm of the view that the vast majority of people, including registered Republicans by and large, share that same view, that same sense of what is, what's appropriate. Justin Sink, Bloomberg.
Thanks, Mr. President. I wanted to ask about your relationship with China now that you've been in office for a couple months. There's obviously the meeting in Alaska that was a little theatrical, and there's the continued human rights abuses. So today, I'm wondering, are you more likely than you were when you came into office to maintain tariffs on China? Are you considering banning imports of forced labor products? And would you consider cutting off U.S. investment or Chinese access to international payment systems?
Well, look, they're each specifically legitimate questions, but they only touch a smidgen of what the relationship with China really is about. I've known Xi Jinping for a long time. Allegedly, by the time I left office as vice president, I had spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader had, because President Obama and the Chinese President Hu decided we should get to know one another, since it was inappropriate for the President of the United States to spend time with the Vice President of another country. But it was obvious he was going to become the new leader of China. So I spent hours upon hours with him alone with an interpreter, my interpreter and his, going into great detail. He's very, very straightforward. Doesn't have a Democratic with a small d bone in his body, but he's a smart guy. He's one of the guys like Putin who thinks that autocracy is the wave of the future. Democracy can't function in an ever complex world. So when I was elected and he called to congratulate me, I think to the surprise of the China experts who were his people on the call as well as mine listening, we had a 2-hour conversation for 2 hours. And we made several things clear to one another. I made it clear to him again, what I've told him in person on several occasions, that we're not looking for confrontation, although we know there will be steep competition. 2, that we'll have strong competition, but we'll insist that China play by the international rules. Fair competition, fair practices, fair trade. Thirdly, in order to compete effectively, I indicated that we're going to deal with China effectively. And we're going to need 3 things to do that, telling our people. First, we're going to invest in American workers and American science. I said that all through the campaign. I say it again, and I'm setting up my administration to be able to do that, which is that, back in the 60s, we used to invest a little over 2% of our entire GDP in pure research and investment in science. Today, it's 0.7%. I'm going to change that. We're going to change that. The future lies in who can, in fact, own the future as it relates to technology, quantum computing, a whole range of things, including in the medical fields. And so what I'm going to do is make sure we invest closer to 2%. One of the reasons why I've set up the PAB, the President's Board with Scientists and the like, again, is we're going to invest in medical research, cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, the things, industries of the future, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotech, and we're going to make real investments. China is out investing us by a long shot because their plan is to own that future. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to reestablish our alliances, and I've been very clear with them. It's not anti-Chinese, and we've talked about it. I want to make sure that, for example, later today, after this, as a matter of fact, shortly after this, which is fine, we've been going close to an hour. I'm happy to go longer, but one of the things that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be speaking with 27 heads of state in Europe. And very shortly, I think within the next hour or so, I don't know the exact time. And earlier this month, and apparently it got the Chinese attention, that's not why I did it, I met with our allies and how we're going to hold China accountable in the region. Australia, India, Japan, and the United States, the so-called Quad. Because we have to have democracies working together. Before too long, I'm going to invite an alliance of democracies to come here to discuss the future. And so we're going to make it clear that in order to deal with these things, we are going to hold China accountable to follow the rules. To follow the rules. Whether it relates to the South China Sea or the North China Sea or the agreement made on Taiwan or a whole range of other things. And the third thing, and the thing that I admire about dealing with Xi is he understands, he makes no pretense about not understanding what I'm saying any more than I do him. I pointed out to him, no leader can be sustained in his position or her position unless they represent the values of the country. And I said, Mr. President, as I've told you before, Americans value the notion of freedom. America values human rights. We don't always live up to our expectations, but it's a value system. We are founded on that principle. And as long as you and your country continues to so blatantly violate human rights, we are going to continue in an unrelenting way to call to the attention of the world and make it clear what's happening. And he understood that. I made it clear that no American president, at least one did, but no American president ever backed down from speaking out of what's happening in the Uyghurs, what's happening in Hong Kong, what's happening in country. That's who we are. The moment a president walks away from that, as the last one did, is the moment we begin to lose our legitimacy around the world. It's who we are. So I see stiff competition with China. China has an overall goal, and I don't criticize them for the goal, but they have an overall goal to become the leading country in the world, the wealthiest country in the world, and the most powerful country in the world. That's not going to happen on my watch, because the United States is going to continue to grow and expand.
Sorry, just to follow up on the meeting of democracies, is that where you expect in a multilateral way to make these decisions about sanctions or
No, that's not where I make the decision. That's where I make sure we're all on the same page. All on the same page. Look, I predict to you, your children or grandchildren are going to be doing their doctoral thesis on issue of who succeeded, autocracy or democracy. Because that is what is at stake. Not just with China. Look around the world. We're in the midst of a fourth industrial revolution of enormous consequence. Will there be middle class? How will people adjust to these significant changes in science and technology, the environment? How will they do that? And are democracies equipped, because all the people get to speak, to compete? It is clear, absolutely clear, and most of the scholars I dealt with at Penn agree with me around the country, that this is a battle between the utility of democracies in the 21st century and autocracies. If you notice, you don't have Russia talking about communism anymore. It's about an autocracy. demand decisions made by a leader of a country. That's what's at stake here. We got to prove democracy works.
Mr. President, sorry, I know you haven't had a chance to address the tragedies in Georgia and Colorado. You had said to stay tuned for actions that you might take on gun control. Wondering if you've made a decision either about sending the manufacturer liability bill that you had promised on day one to Capitol Hill, or executive actions like going after ghost guns or giving money to cities and states to battle gun control.
All the above. It's a matter of timing. As you've all observed, successful presidents, better than me, have been successful in large part because they know how to time what they're doing, order it, decide in priorities what needs to be done. The next major initiative is, and I'll be announcing it Friday in Pittsburgh in detail, is to rebuild the infrastructure, both physical and technological infrastructure of this country, so that we can compete and create significant numbers of really good paying jobs. Really good paying jobs. And some of you have been around long enough to know that used to be a great Republican goal and initiative. I still think the majority of the American people don't like the fact that we are now ranked, 85th in the world in infrastructure. I mean, look, the future rests on whether or not we have the best airports that can accommodate air travel, ports that you can get in and out of quickly, so businesses decide. Some of you, if you're ever local reporters.
I understand that firearms sounds a lot like bridge.
No, I understand that the infrastructure of a bridge and airports are pretty good.
Yes, you get it.
How many schools in America we're sending our kids to don't have adequate ventilation? How many homes, buildings, office complexes are wasting billions of barrels of oil over time because they can't hold in the heat or the air conditioning because it leaks through the windows that are so porous in the connections? It's amazing. So there's so much we can do that's good stuff, makes people healthier, and creates good jobs. And I think that I got one more question here. And Janet from Univision.
Thank you, Mr. President. We too have been reporting at the border, and just like Cecilia, we ran into a pair of siblings who came in on Monday, were detained by CBP, had the phone number for their mother who lives in the U.S. We have contacted the mother. That's the only way they know her kids are here, because CBP today, Thursday, has not contacted that mother. So when can we expect your promise of things getting better with contacting and expediting?
Well, they're already getting better, but they're going to get they're going to a whole hell of a lot better real quick, or we're going to hear some people leaving. Okay? We can get this done. We're going to get it done. I had a long meeting with the entire team and several cabinet level officers the other night. We're going to be moving within the next week over 100,000, 1,000 people out of the Border Patrol into safe, secure beds and facilities. We're going to significantly ramp up. We're already out there contacting everyone from getting some of the employees at HHS. There's a lot of them doing other things and move them into making those calls. We're in the process of rearranging and providing for the personnel needed to get that done. But I admire the fact that you were down there, you're making the calls yourself. It's real. The next thing that has to happen, though, as you well know, has to happen. There have to be some certitude that this is actually mom, dad, or whomever. And there's ways to do that. There's ways to do that, a little bit like determining whether or not you got the right code for your credit card. What was your dog's name, kind of thing. I'm being a bit facetious, but not really. And also seeking harder data. from DNA to birth certificates, which takes longer. So I want to do this as quickly, as humanly possible, and as safely as possible.
As you well know, treating the root causes in Latin America doesn't change things overnight. How do you realistically and physically keep these families from coming to the U.S. when things will not get better in their countries right away?
Well, I can't guarantee that, but I know, that old thing, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. You know as well as I do. You cover it. You have it's not like somebody sitting on a hand-hewn table in Guatemala, in somewhere in Mexico or in Guadalupe saying, I got a great idea. Let's sell everything we have. Give it to a coyote. Have them take our kids across the border into a desert where they don't speak the language. Won't that be fun? Let's go. That's not how it happens. People don't want to leave. When my great-grandfather got in a coffin ship in the Irish Sea, the expectation was he going to live long enough on that ship to get to the United States of America. But they left because of what the Brits had been doing. They were in real trouble. They didn't want to leave, but they had no choice. So I can't guarantee we're going to solve everything, but I can guarantee we can make everything better. We can make it better. We can change the lives of so many people. And the other thing I want to point out to you, and I hope you point out, I realize it's much more heart-wrenching, and it is, to deal with a 5 and 6 and 7-year-old. But you went down there and you saw the vast majority of these children, 70% are 16 years old, 17 years old, and mostly males. Doesn't make it good, bad, or indifferent, but the idea that we have tens of thousands of kids in these god-awful facilities that are really little babies crying all night. There's some, that's true. That's why we got to act. And yesterday, I asked my team, both the director of the two agencies as well as others, I asked them what would they in fact, and I asked their opinion because they're the experts, but I said, focus on the most vulnerable immediately. But there's no reason why in the next month as people cross the border, that phone call can't be made in the first 48 hours and begin.
If I may ask one last question, have you had any talks with Senate Republicans who are threatening this administration with not considering the immigration legislation that was passed in the House until the situation at the border has been resolved?
No, because I know they have to posture for a while. They sort of got to get it out of their system. This is but I and begin.
If I may ask one last question, have you had any talks with Senate Republicans who are threatening this administration with not considering the immigration legislation that was passed in the House until the situation at the border has been resolved?
No, because I know they have to posture for a while. They sort of got to get it out of their system. This is but I'm ready to work with any Republican. This is
Border has been resolved.
No, because I know they have to posture for a while. They sort of got to get it out of their system. This is but I focus on the most vulnerable immediately. But there's no reason why in the next month as people cross the border, that phone call can't be made in the first 48 hours and begin.
If I may ask one last question, have you had any talks with Senate Republicans who are threatening this administration with not considering the immigration legislation that was passed in the House until the situation at the border has been resolved?
No, because I know they have to posture for a while. They sort of got to get it out of their system. This is but I'm ready to work with any Republican who wants to help solve the problem or make the situation better. But folks, I'm going. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And the
Who am I
next thing we'll
talking
get to is the thing that you'll have a long post show. So we're
Yeah.
playing the drinking game. The promo code is dementia, not implying anything. Crowder Biden stream. If you watch this on Tilda Soil, what was it? What's the name of the guy who was on Dirty Work? The dad in that.
Challenges climate change, immigration reform, gun control, voting rights.
Well, I plan on making progress.
100,000?
Yeah.
Arizona, Nevada. These were within 10 to 20,000 votes.
Yeah, it was very close.
All of them under the name Jim Eagle.
We should have seen
It's
these roads I just talked about.
We're going to get it done.
Where we
I
go,
had a
we're not
long
gonna
meeting
need
with the
roads.
entire
That's a gap.
team and several cabinet level officers the other night. We're going to be
Sorry.
moving within the next week over 100,000. I mean, 1,000 people out of
Oh man, that's a Biden
the
gaffe.
Border Patrol into safe, secure beds and facilities. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Before I take questions,